What is going on, everybody? Welcome into Talkin BS. I'm your host, as always, is Zamora. If you can, please follow me on Twitter at ZamoraBSB. Best place for any and all show updates. And today, if you clicked on that thumbnail, you know what time it is. We are doing an off-season preview for the Los Angeles Clippers. Now, let me tell you, this was not an easy one. The Clippers are short on draft picks. They are way over the luxury tax, and they are trying to continue contending because they are moving into a new arena next year, and they have new uniforms and all this stuff that's brand new, ready to go for a team with very high expectations. A free agent in Paul George, a free agent in James Harden. A lot of big things to get through in this offseason preview. But first, if you like this kind of content, I'm going to be doing one of these previews for every team before the NBA draft. So if you like this kind of stuff, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. And without further ado, let's get into it. The Los Angeles Clippers offseason preview. So what we're going to be covering today are some of the weaknesses that the Clippers need to improve on. We're going to go over the tools that they have at their disposal to get better. We're going to create a checklist of must-dos that the front office must address before they go any further. Then we're probably going to skip the draft because you don't have any first-round picks. But then we are going to go into trade proposals, and we're going to hit free agency and see what we can do about this Clippers team. And then at the end, we'll have a nice 10-man rotation that we can be really excited about heading into the next season. But first things first, let's see the weaknesses that the Clippers need to improve on. You were 12th in the league in points per game, 11th in points allowed per game, 22nd in fast break points allowed, 21st in assists per game, 25th in rebounds per game, 21st in assist to turnover ratio, 26th in field goal attempts per game, and 22nd in three-point attempts per game. So you're right there, borderline top 10 in both offense and defense. There are some things that we can improve on, like the assists per game or the rebounds per game, three-point attempts per game, all that kind of stuff. Just those little things that we can improve on to, boost both of those sides of the ball to top 10 status. And in order to do that, let's see what we got to work with for this preview. You have 0 picks in the first round. You have the 46th overall pick in the second round. Norman Powell, Terrence Mann, and Amir Coffey's contracts are all tradable. Over $174 million in committed salaries in the 24-25 season, well above the luxury tax line. You could have 25, 26, and 27 picks, but likely won't. You owe your 28 to Philadelphia, top 3 protected in 29, and you own your own first in 2030. So now that we know what the weaknesses are and tools that we have to improve on those weaknesses, let's get a checklist going first to understand, what we're going to actually try to do and what we're going to try to accomplish in this episode. So first things first, we got to figure out who's actually going to be coming with us to this new stadium. Who is the starting five that gets to christen that brand new floor in the new stadium? Is Paul George going to be back? He is a free agent. He has a player option that he is likely going to decline. There are rumors that he is looking towards Philadelphia, though Shams, I believe, reported today that Philadelphia was out on Paul George. We'll see how that goes. Then we've got to worry about PJ Tucker's option. He's likely going to opt in. He is making pretty big money for somebody who really didn't even crack the rotation last year. We need to add some youth. Definitely need to add some youth and some athleticism to the team. And then we need to ensure that we have some backups. We have some guys there just in case Paul George, Kawhi, Harden, any of these guys end up getting hurt because, they don't have the healthiest track record. So definitely need to add in those little spots. So speaking of PJ Tucker and seeing what we could do with his contract, like I said, he's likely going to opt in. So that means we can use that money and trade it. And in this trade, we are going to be sending PJ Tucker and our 46th overall pick in the draft to the Indiana Pacers in exchange for the 50th overall pick and the 51st overall pick in the draft. The Pacers signed James Jones last year because they didn't have enough toughness on the team. They needed somebody who could come in and kind of hold them accountable and kind of be the asshole on the team, for lack of a better word, right? Somebody who was going to come in and be able to, protect their guys, be the tough guy on the team and instill a little bit of that edge. And it helped. Indiana ended up making to the Eastern Conference Finals with that roster. So, definitely helped. But James Jones is getting a little up there. I don't think Indiana is planning on re-signing him. So in that case, they could use somebody like a PJ Tucker. And at the end of the day, I think Indiana could actually use a PJ Tucker. You got guys in your conference like Julius Randle, Bam Adebayo, some of these bigger forward, big center types that PJ Tucker actually does really well against still, even in his advanced age. They would get PJ Tucker to make things easier. They would also acquire the 46th overall pick in the draft, so they would move up, 4 or 5 spots in the draft to take on PJ Tucker's contract. So a little bit of a sweetener. They also don't really need all those picks. I believe they have a first-round pick, and then they would have those 2 seconds with the 50th and the 51st overall pick. This way, they consolidate on those picks and bring somebody in that can actually add some real toughness and edge to the team. For Los Angeles, you move your 46th overall pick and PJ Tucker, you get off of his money a year early. You bring no recurring salary in. So that's like $11.5 million off the books, which is really nice. You get 2 second-round picks instead of the 1, so you get to take 2 cracks at the draft. This draft is pretty deep, so I'm pretty sure you'll still be able to find some guys there that could be maybe contributors in the future. Probably end up with both of those guys on 2-way contracts, which is absolutely fine. Youth and having those young contracts on the books is very, very valuable with this new CBA, especially considering that you're getting off of PJ's, nearly $12 million, and then bringing in a couple, young guys that won't even count against the cap really. So that's really nice for the Clippers. But we're not done there. I came up with another one just because I feel like this team needs a shakeup. I think we're going to try to maintain keeping those starting 5 because I believe in continuity for the most part. But I think there is a certain benefit to shaking things up, especially on the outside, right? On some of the rotation pieces and stuff like that. So I think this trade would be very beneficial to Los Angeles. They would send Terrence Mann, Norman Powell, and Kobe Brown to the Charlotte Hornets in exchange for Seth Curry, Grant Williams, and Vaso Micic from the Hornets. So Charlotte does this because they get Terrence Mann, who's going to come in and probably play the starting 2 guard next to LaMelo. He is a good ball handler, good playmaker, and good defender for his size. He'd be a really good piece next to LaMelo, and I just believe in their games really matching and meshing really well. Having 2 ball handlers in the backcourt with size and athleticism is going to go a long way for the Hornets. They get Norman Powell, who is on a big contract, but he only has 1 year left. A movement shooter you can bring off of the bench. It's going to be really helpful for them. Their bench scoring was not that great last year. And then you get Kobe Brown to replace Grant Williams. Kobe Brown actually played pretty well for the Clippers last year. He came in when they figured out PJ Tucker wasn't really working. So they brought him in and he did pretty well. And he's a young piece. He can come in and hopefully be that backup 4 and, create some depth for Charlotte now that they're, losing out on a couple guys. They're also just, getting off of so many guards, right? They have LaMelo, they have Micic, they have Trey Mann, they have Seth Curry, they have all these ball handlers. They don't really need all those. You kind of consolidate a couple of your ball handlers in Micic and Curry, and you get a guy who plays a little bit better defense than both of those guys in Terrence Mann, who can also create and, play next to LaMelo, a little more seamlessly. For the Clippers, you get a really good shooting guard in Seth Curry, who's one of the better 3-point shooters in the league. He can handle it and create a little bit for himself as well. So, you're not totally losing everything you would lose with Norman Powell. You kind of bring a lot of that back with Seth Curry. But you also bring in a guy like Grant Williams, who's going to do a lot of the dirty work. Terrence Mann was kind of that role for the Clippers. But I think Grant Williams would be really beneficial to this team just because I feel like he's the kind of guy who's going to kind of take on that PJ Tucker / Terrence Mann role. He's willing to get in guys' face. He's willing to do all the dirty work on the court. He doesn't mind doing all that stuff. I think he'd be a really good culture fit here. And he's a younger version of, PJ Tucker where he can come in and still contribute in a big way. And then you also get Micic, right? If Bones Highland just is not working as your backup point guard in the future, you have Micic there who's going to steady the ship and play the right way more than anything. So, and he's a big guard. He can play differently than Bones Highland, a little bit more similarly to James Harden. So, you get a little bit of that back. So now that we got some trades out of the way, let's see free agency. Let's check out where we're at with some financials here. Paul George and James Harden off the books, the Clippers would actually be under the salary cap. And it sounds nice, right? Until you realize that you have to re-sign Paul George and James Harden. Paul George is likely going to be getting at least Kawhi Leonard's contract. So he's looking for at least that like $52 million, over 3 years contract. Reports are that he's not willing to take that he wants the extra year and a little bit of extra money on top of that, because Kawhi kind of took like a little bit of a discount for the Clippers, and they're hoping that Paul George would do the same thing, since Kawhi did it, and they figure Kawhi is the actual star, but Paul George is like, I'm more available, so I deserve more. So we'll see how that ends up turning out. I just think, at the end of the day, Paul George is using teams like Philadelphia or maybe even Orlando as like leverage, and he's not necessarily going to leave the Clippers. I think that's his home. He's from LA. He seems to enjoy playing in front of his family and his friends and stuff in LA. So, I don't see that necessarily happening. And the Clippers, probably will do their best to not let that happen. Like I said, they're moving into a new stadium next year. They want a team that they want the fans to believe in, right? They want to be able to sell out that arena. They're going to want to have Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, and James Harden, to sell tickets, to put on the posters and all that stuff. So without him, the team can kind of fall apart there. You might just have to let James Harden walk. You might have to trade Kawhi Leonard at that point, and then you're moving into a new stadium with no excitement. It's just a bad situation. So I think, LA is kind of has no leverage here. If Paul George wants a big contract and bigger than Kawhi's, he might just get it. So, I would be prepared as Clippers fans for that scenario to happen. James Harden, on the other hand, I don't see him getting a lot of suitors. He's kind of burned bridges with like half the league already. So, I don't see that happening. I think LA in that situation has a little bit more leverage. From reports that I've seen, Harden is looking at like a 2 or 3 year deal worth like $40 million a year, which I think is fair. They're able now, because of the moves that we made, right? We're saving like $20 million on both of those transactions that we made with the trades earlier. So, that makes it a little bit more easier to swallow, but still, you guys are going to be like well over the salary cap and well over the luxury tax and even well over the second apron once you guys re-sign Harden and Paul George. So with that said, we're going to have a hole in the starting lineup now that we traded Terrence Mann away. We need a backup center, and just to have some wing depth, I think would be nice. So let's look at some guards first, since we're going to have a hole in the starting lineup. The nice thing about having Paul George and Kawhi, though, is that they can kind of shift all over. So, you can put Paul George at the 2, Kawhi at the 3, and then have like a hole at the 4, or even start Grant Williams at the 4 probably. Or, you can move Paul George to the 3, Kawhi at the 4, play some more small ball, and then, bring in a 2 guard. So we're going to look at all these different options. So at the 2, and all these guys, I think, you can offer them the minimum, because at that point you would be offering them a lot of playing time. You have a hole in the starting lineup. So a lot of these guys, you get to play with Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. First of all, like a lot of the guys in the NBA really look up to those guys. And, a lot of these guys look at Paul George and think, that's one of the best players in the NBA. Kawhi Leonard as well. He is, one of the best players in the NBA, regardless of the injuries and stuff. So I think a lot of these guys would be like excited to come to LA and play with these guys. And on top of that, the promise of minutes. So, though they are getting a smaller contract because it's a minimum, I think a lot of these guys would be getting minimums from a lot of teams. But the benefit of having more playing time and being able to, up your value a little bit, I think would go a long way towards being able to get some of the better free agents out there. So with that said, let's look at some of the shooting guards. We got Gary Harris, Eric Gordon, Josh Richardson, Josh Okogie, Luke Kennard, and Lonnie Walker. So I think any of these guys would be pretty good pieces. Obviously, I think at the top would probably be the best option, and down at the bottom one would probably be the least. Lonnie Walker, I think, is just a little small, and he's not necessarily like a great starter or anything. Luke Kennard's a very good shooter, but I don't think he's a good enough defender. But, if you want that spacing, he could provide that. Josh Okogie is like a pure defense guy, which could work, I think, because you already have so much offense with Harden and Paul George and Kawhi. I think somebody who doesn't really need the ball in their hands a ton would be pretty beneficial to this team. So, and then Josh Richardson, he's a little bit better offensively than Okogie, but not as good defensively. So he's a little bit more of a balance. Eric Gordon, he's a vet. I think he'd be a really good get for this team. I think Eric Gordon would come into the Clippers. He's played for the Clippers before, and I think he would be a pretty good fit here. Same with Gary Harris. I think Gary Harris is one of the better 3-and-D guards out in the league right now, especially in free agency. So I think if you could offer him a contract, I think he'd be willing to take it. But I think we might want to go a little bit bigger here, just because there's so much size in the West. So let's look at some forwards. We got Haywood Highsmith, Kelly Oubre, Derek Jones Jr., Royce O'Neal, Najee Marshall. Haywood Highsmith at the top of my list here. I think he would be great for the Clippers. I just don't know if he would be willing to sign for a minimum. He's a really good player. He would bring a lot of the stuff that the Clippers would need. But like I said, he's a little bit smaller too, so I don't know if I want to go that route. Kelly Oubre, I think, same kind of deal. I don't know if he would sign for a minimum deal after having such a good year with Philadelphia last year, but you never know. Like I said, he might want to come play with Paul George and Kawhi. Derek Jones Jr., really, really, really good athlete. But other than that, I don't know how much he would really help with the Clippers. I don't know if he really fits schematically. Royce O'Neal, I think, is a great fit. 3-and-D guy, can play the 4, can play the 3. If you have, Paul George, Kawhi, and Royce O'Neal, I think any of those guys could switch with any of them. So I think that's a really good target. And then Najee Marshall, I think he'd be really good here. Had a career high in 3-point percentage. I don't know if that shooting is real, but if it is, I think he'd be a really good candidate as well. But still, let's look at some bigger, more like power forward types. Kyle Anderson, Nicholas Batum, Trendon Watford, Jay Crowder, Marcus Morris. So these are going to be more of your 4s if you want to slide Kawhi up to the 3. Kyle Anderson would be pretty good for the minimum. He can play make a little bit. I think that would help. I just kind of wanted more athleticism. Nicholas Batum, another one. He's a little bit older, can play make a little bit, can handle the ball a little bit, plays really good defense. But he might be a little too old for my taste. Trendon Watford's a young guy. Now, this might be the opposite, right? I think on the other end of the spectrum, I think he might just be too young to, especially if you want him to start. I think he's a really good backup. I don't know if I really feel comfortable with Grant Williams starting and him backing him up. I just, I think we can do better than that. Jay Crowder and Marcus Morris, another couple older guys that I don't know if I'd be really comfortable with them starting. So I think out of all these guys, the main one I would target here is Royce O'Neal. In my opinion, I think he just makes the most sense. I really love the idea of the switchability between Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, and him. And, he's a bigger, thicker, stockier guy. He could play the 4 a little bit easier than some of these guys. So I think that's the main target that we're going to go for here in this final rotation. Now, if you'll notice, I didn't really mention anything about centers. I just wanted to kind of fill that starter spot. But I think a center who would be a really, really great target here, especially considering that you guys were bottom 10 in rebounding, is Andre Drummond. I think if you got Andre Drummond to back up Zubats, I think he'd be perfect. So that's another one I'm going to add to this final rotation. I think, chances are he would probably need more money than the minimum. But like I said, I think if he saw a chance to win a title, he's been playing the past few years in Chicago. He's got to be tired of losing, right? So come to LA, play with Kawhi, play with PG, bring something that they actually really need, some size and some rebounding at that backup center position. And, I think he could be a key piece. So now let's look at the final rotation. We got James Harden backed up by Micic, Paul George backed up by Seth Curry, Kawhi backed up by Amir Coffey, Royce O'Neal backed up by Grant Williams, and Ivica Zubats backed up by Andre Drummond. And on your deep bench, you got Bones Highland, Brandon Boston Jr., Cam Reddish, Kai Jones, Lamar Stevens. So on your deep bench is where a lot of your athleticism and stuff is. So if any of those guys progress, right, they're real young guys. Lamar Stevens is young, Cam Reddish is young, Kai Jones is super young, Boston, Highland, all these guys are really young players. So I think if any of them can give you something and take one of those backup spots, that's really, really going to help you there. You have a lot of versatility in your wings and your front court area between Royce O'Neal, Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, Grant Williams, Amir Coffey. All these guys can guard 2 to 4. So there's a lot of switchability there. Ty Lue really likes to play small, so I think that's an option with this lineup. you could play any of those guys up and down the lineup. You got some good playmaking with James Harden. If Harden gets hurt, you got a really good backup in Micic, who plays a similar style. You got depth there at the point guard position, and you got enough wings. You have enough size. You have enough athleticism here, and with the addition of Drummond specifically, you have enough rebounding now. So I like this lineup. I think this could be a really good, last ditch effort to, try to get these guys a ring. I know there's not a lot of hope for Clippers Nation. I'm not saying this exact team, but bring this caliber of roster into the new stadium next year, and there's going to be buzz. There's going to be excitement. And at the end of the day, if it doesn't work out, you've moved into the new stadium, you've made some of your money back, then I would consider, blowing it up after that. But I mean, we just saw, as crazy as the West is and as competitive as the West is, we just saw the Dallas Mavericks make it to the finals. You guys lost to the Western Conference champions in the first round. You have just as much, say to we could have made it as anybody else. The West is super competitive. It is. But with Kawhi Leonard and Paul George playing as well as they did last year, I think, you add some, veteran pieces and some shooting and some rebounding and stuff. And I think this team could take you over the top. If you disagree with anything I said, though, please let me know down in the comments. I love to hear it. I love the feedback. It makes me better. So please let me know down in the comments. If you have watched this entire video, though, and you do like this, subscribe to the channel, please. It would help me very, very much. I appreciate you so much. To my subscribers, I love you guys. And as always, I love y'all. Have y'all a wonderful day. Talkin BS, we out.